So over there on Saturday, there were anti-war protests around the country. I could not make that because I was at Frozen 2 with Saul. And he says better than Frozen 1 because he liked some of the spirits. I'm not sure. I think it was a little bit convoluted. Frozen 1 was, I thought, a little bit stronger, but that's okay.
I take back what I said about our pop culture ignorance.
Yeah, there you go. I like the music in Frozen 1 a little bit better. I thought the music was a little bit more memorable. Nevertheless, on Sunday, I did make it to a march across the Brooklyn Bridge that was billed by various constituencies in different ways. It was a solidarity march. It was an anti-hate march. It was inspired largely by the acts of anti-Semitism, violent anti-Semitism that we have had in New York City over the past couple of months. And I went down there, was hanging with some of the Bernie constituency as they were, being present there. And I was like anticipating that there could be
a dance battle.
Well, I thought that there could be like a little bit of friction, right? Because a march like this could easily turn into something like could be about the Iran attack. It could be like a pro-Iran attack. It could be anti. There could be fighting. Arguing.
Yeah, Zionists, anti-Zionists.
Exactly. And there were like some Kahanists there. They are members of an American contingency of a party that's actually been outlawed in Israel. They're so sort of virulently racist and militant. But I only saw really 2 instances in the entire march, and there were I don't know how many people were there, but there was easily thousands upon thousands. I mean, it took like 4 hours to walk a block and a half, essentially, across the bridge. I mean, there were, I don't know how many thousands.
Matt and I went. We left when we found out it wasn't a Suleiman remembrance.
Well, so there were 2 instances. Once, like almost where we get to right across from City Hall, which I think this first image is from on the right. There was a guy with a MAGA hat who was getting into arguments with some of the marchers and ostensibly saying like, Donald Trump has been great for Israel.
I'd like to promote the guy who just happens to correlate with this rise in anti-Jewish terrorism.
Well, that is, there were some people who had posters to that effect, like that the rise, there's been X percentage, I can't remember what it was, rise in anti-Semitism since Donald Trump became president. And some guy in a MAGA hat was getting into an argument with him. And I refrained. And then as I'm walking across the bridge with my daughter and some of the Bernie folks, I'm looking at Twitter. I see that Matt has tweeted out a clip of Bari Weiss and said something like she is, what is it?
Laura Loomer with a stronger support structure.
Yeah, exactly. Laura Loomer with a stronger support structure. And I'm like, what? Why is Bari Weiss carrying a microphone? And apparently she was reporting for reliable sources because, CNN always embeds people and gives microphones to the leaders, to people who ostensibly are marching against stuff, which I found also odd. But Bari Weiss was only the second opportunity I saw where someone was using this basically anti-hate march as political leverage to push some form of hatred or, sort of divisive political message.
Against the guy who could be the first Jewish president.
And then ultimately it turns out to be against the guy who could be the first Jewish president. Here's Bari Weiss, monomaniacal, apparently.
It took 2 years for the mainstream press to cover the fact that the leaders of the Women's March, one of whom is now a surrogate to presidential candidate Bernie Sanders, that she has close relationship with Louis Farrakhan.
Now, presumably, I I think she's taught. I'm not sure
They're
who she's
always
talking about.
obsessed with Linda
Sarsour.
Sarsour. That's who it is. Yes.
And
They're
I don't know
obsessed
that
with her.
Sarsour has a close relationship with Louis
We
Farrakhan.
were married briefly in the 90s.
Didn't
But the
she
idea
have
that
dinner with him once or something like that?
The idea that she is
We had intimacy problems.
that Louis. First of all, I got news for you, folks. Louis Farrakhan has been around for a long time. And he has been a public figure for a long time. And he's been a far more prominent public figure. Like, this is about as low an ebb as it's gotten for Louis Farrakhan in my adult lifetime.
He hasn't been relevant since Tapper asked Keith Ellison about him.
Yeah, well, not if Bari Weiss has anything to say about
Well,
it.
but here's my point, is that the idea that you're talking about Louis Farrakhan in this march, and you're using it as a way to bash Bernie Sanders, in some ways, I think really doesn't capture the spirit of that march. And the idea that this was also sort of the project of CNN is
embarrassing.
It's embarrassing. And you know, if she's worried about people talking about Jews in such a sort of an essentialist and reductionist way, she might want to check out this publication called the New York Times and see what her co-columnist Brett Stevens is writing these days.
Yeah, it's right.
Race
But
science is totally kosher.
I just think what's
go.
Yeah, I mean, you look and there was like some ridiculous thing with Einhorst CILE and like all this nonsense that most normal people don't care about. But you know, what's so funny is like the biggest performative marker you could, arguably slap down for saying I am, clearly not anti-Jewish on some level because I'm advocating for somebody to become the first Jewish president of the United States. Like, maybe should count for something. But look, Bernie.
She's looking to balance it out.
Yeah, exactly. Bernie was the only member of the caucus to vote against sanctions against Iran. He's talked about Palestinian humans as human beings.
Yeah, he's a
and
Jew
so
in name only. Exactly.
They are going to, one of the great ironies as this progresses is you're going to see all of these hacks, everybody from AIPAC to Bari Weiss are going to they're going to try to Corbyn him. And it will be, innately less effective on some level because he is Jewish, but they're going to go at it.
There's no way that that's going to stick. It's effing ridiculous.
It would be hard, but there's going to be
It was ridiculous with, Corbyn as well. We're going to have to fight back is my point.
I think there's going to be an attempt during the Democratic primary, but I don't think it's going to be terribly functional after that, to be honest.
No.
No, it's definitely going to happen under Trump for sure.
But I think it's less
And
effective.
it will be Well, look, I think it's going to be the same dynamic that it usually is, which is that the Democratic nominee, including Sanders, will get the overwhelming majority of the. But you will see AIPAC. You will see all of these groups that are committed to Likud and occupation going after him.
But
no doubt.
What they're going to do is, in the general, they will convert to he is anti-Israel, because that will motivate the Christian Zionists more so than that he's anti-Semitic.
They don't make.
I know it's a surrogate.
They don't
it's just
make
not as
any
effective.
distinction there.
It's just not as effective.
The
because,
majority of the Zionists in this country are rapture-hungry Christians, no?
Yes, I think that's true. But I think the idea being
Zionists.
the idea being in the Democratic Party, you're dealing with a much larger and Jewish vote that's up for grabs. Whereas in the general election, it is really you're talking more about Zionists. And that includes an even bigger group of Christians than it does Jews in that instance.
Bernie wants to ban Jesus from Israel.
Bernie wants to. He said, "Jesus, get out of Israel," and it was very offensive.
I guess we'll see who there are more of, the liberal, sane Jews who don't identify their entire being with Israel, or the other kind.
I wouldn't go so far as to call them sane.
Yeah, let's not get into that.